for
Definitely.
now, let's move on to the Kyrie situation. I know you wanted to talk about the Kyrie situation. I actually wanted to. We didn't go thoroughly on this. Is this
Mm.
Kyrie situation about what we're talking about? Of you mentioned before, like the Ben Simmons thing that we heard. Is it? Go into it, please.
So there's a lot to
Yeah.
add because there's different parts that have been coming from the week, right?
Yes.
Um, First one that I want to hit on is definitely the situation with him and Nick Wright. Um, as you can tell at this point, Kyrie is not your conventional NBA player. He
Yes.
doesn't want to be labeled a certain way. He doesn't want to be thought of a certain way.
Hmm.
Granted, I believe Kyrie has moments where it's very questionable what he's thinking or what he's saying or what even does it even make sense what he's saying, right? Um Kyrie's now what Kyrie well, the reason why I wanted to discuss Kyrie today is because Nick Wright a couple days back actually. I said a couple weeks, but it was like 8 days, probably like 8 days ago. Give or take. Um was He wrote something on his Twitter about Kyrie and the trade rumors of if Kyrie was traded, that he would retire. And then Kyrie went on to post a gif of a puppet and laid that right underneath the Nick Wright post. And from there, it led on to Kyrie posting a little bit more. I got a direct quote of what Nick Wright proceeded to
Ooh.
say after that is Kyrie, if you're saying you didn't say you'd retire if you were traded, then your beef is with your representation, not with me, because you and I both know that's what they've told people. So then after that, Kyrie responds and goes, the
Oh.
puppet doesn't know he's a puppet, and then proceeds to send another gift that says, listen to your master. So greatly,
Wow.
it has been it has been a fun time on NBA Twitter lately to see all of these funny stories and see
Yeah.
this craziness that's happening. But um it the reason why I wanted to bring this up is it's leading me to I had this conversation offline with a few other individuals and I wanted to
Mhm.
bring it to you too, is that I'm starting to believe that out of all the leagues, all professional leagues, if you see if anyone has like either a marred past or like they have a murky history with certain things, or they just not, as in Kyrie's situation, not entwined with the same things that everybody else is thinking, it affects their careers. And we've seen how it has this type of thought process changes Kyrie's perspective in the league greatly. It's not just this, it's not these little
Mhm.
things that made people feel how they feel about Kyrie, but it was led to a perception in my mind of like Kyrie's not as good as he really is in my mind. And another example I wanted to use off of that as well was thinking of how Carmelo got a bad rap, and
Mhm.
it changed 3 years in his career just off of perception. In other sports, you really do not see that same situation. And I don't want to dive into too deep, but like you
Yeah.
take even like the Trevor Bauer situation that's happening in baseball. I think Trevor Bauer, if given another opportunity, it would be easier for him to rehabilitate his image
Mhm.
in baseball than it would be for Kyrie to ever rehabilitate his image in basketball. I don't know how you feel about that, but that was one of the things that I
Yeah.
wanted to fixate on this conversations that he's having and
Yeah.
poking fun at Nick Wright.
It's pretty funny that you say that about like Trevor Bauer can fix his image a lot more. And it's for basketball, as we see. these guys are more, they have bigger personalities. They're more out there. And I heard, I think it was, I don't know if he still is, like a part owner, was like on a podcast I was listening to of the Kings. He was a part owner of the Kings, and he was talking about like what he looks for in investments and all this stuff for sports. And he was talking about of like when you look at baseball players, football players, and all that, the reason why those athletes aren't as prominent is because of their hats, their helmets, things that are covering their face. You don't actually see them all the time during the game, and it's easy. Like think about it in baseball. We're not. I mean, with a pitcher, we're looking at a pitcher more often, but like no one's really looking at the outfielder that often. We only see him when he bats or he catches the ball, and stuff like that. So these guys, we don't actually get to know them as much as we do as basketball players, where basketball players is 5 on 5. We see these guys all the time. We see their outfits all the time. We're talking about what they're wearing when they're going into and like what they're eating, what they're posting on social media. Like we actually care about these people more than other sports. And like you're saying, when more people kind of have this perception of you, and I agree with you. I kind of feel like the NBA or maybe the NBA media kind of paints Kyrie more as a villain. And they only talk about all the bad stuff that he does. Where is it really bad? I guess. I mean, he had this stuff last season where he left the team for some points. They talked about before a long time ago when him and LeBron didn't get along together. Talked about the stuff that happened in Boston where he says, "Oh, I want to come back at the beginning of the season," and then halfway through the season, he's like, "Get me out of here." That's what they talk about, and they kind of vilify Kyrie, but they don't talk about all the stuff that he does about donating and all the. He does a lot of stuff outside of basketball that's really helpful and um, culture wise, and it's really surprising to see that. And like you're saying, when they kind of vilify him and talk about bad about him all the time, your perception is kind of, oh, this guy isn't as good as we thought. And just recently, when you brought up about this Kyrie situation, at first I thought this was going to be like I mentioned before, the Kyrie Ben Simmons kind of trade talk stuff. So I was just trying to look at Kyrie's numbers to compare to Ben Simmons, and just looking at Kyrie's numbers, I was like, oh my god, this guy is a monster. Like no one talks about him being this good, and like whenever I watch Kyrie play, every single time I watch Kyrie play, I'm like, my goodness, this guy is so good. Like no one talks about it. Looking at his numbers from, so I was trying to compare Ben Simmons and Kyrie in 2019.
Mm.
So I mean, this one was, it's probably not the best numbers I can grab, but like just they're very similar to 2020. But like 27 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.4 steals, shooting close to 40% on 3 pointers. Like this
Mm.
man is dominating. It's crazy.
Yep. And you know what? Since you already saw the stats, but
Yeah.
I wanted to play a game out of this because
Oh, okay.
it just to show how I think this perception game has done something in people not really appreciating the talent that this guy
Yeah.
has. Because I'm gonna give you three. I'm gonna give you three players, three stat lines. I'm gonna give you their games played in the season. I'm gonna
Mhm.
give you their 50, 40, 90 splits. In the sense of not 50, 40, 90. I mean their field goal, their 3-point percentage, and then their free throw percentage, and then their points.
Okay.
So
Okay.
first player played 52 games, was shooting around 51% from the field, nearly 40% from the 3-point line, and then 88% from the free throw line, and then was averaging close to 25 points. Um, Next player played 51 games, was averaging 51%, um, was shooting 37% from the 3-point line, and then shot 85% from the free throw line, and played and scored 28 points, close to 29, 28.5, so close to 29. and I'm rounding up for most of
Yeah,
these.
yeah.
And then the last player is played 54 games. Um, he shot 50%, close to close to 51% from the field. So 50.6, 40% from the field, and then 92% from the free throw line, and was scoring 27 points per game. Those three players, like who, I'm going to give you three names.
Okay.
Uh, you know what? I'm just going to say those names.
Okay, just say that,
Those three players was the first one was Kawhi Leonard.
Ooh,
The second one was Joel Embiid, and then the third one was Kyrie Irving.
damn.
And yet, not once did you hear Kyrie Irving was mentioned
Mhm.
in MVP conversation. But yet, he played more games than Joel Embiid this year.
That's
Let
crazy.
that sink in. We've talked about the 2 weeks he took off. Granted, Kyrie took 2 weeks off, but he actually did not get injured during the season this year.
Yeah.
That was one thing I wanted to keep in mind too. But he was the guy was having a spectacular year, and
Yeah.
he's in the middle of his prime. And the way how this guy is talked about and his game is perceived in the league is with media pundits is just it's like the guy is only scoring 10 points per game. And it just baffles me. It baffles me, honestly.
Yeah, it's crazy because like the media, I listen to a lot of different just basketball podcasts in general, and everyone talks very poorly of Kyrie. And it got to the point where, like I was mentioning, for myself, I was even like, oh, Kyrie, we all know Kyrie's good, but he's like what, like 21 points, maybe like 2 assists, 4 rebounds. Like that's kind of what I was having in my head. But then really just looking at his numbers, that's insane. And then I also had the same exact what you're saying of I had the perspective of he's missing all these games, but he played more games than Kawhi and Joel Embiid. That's that's insane. That is
Exactly.
insane. And it just goes to show of like how the media portrays one of the best players in the NBA right now.